morning, everyone. So good to see you all. Thank you for joining us for this morning CSCB coffee hour. We are very excited to have Dan Bean, who is the program manager with the Palisade Insectary, with us this morning. He'll be going over their Request the Bug program, some of the projects they have going on, and I'm sure a little bit more context about the insectary and the important role that they serve in Colorado agriculture and natural resources. And so that said, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat or save them for the end, because we will have time for a Q&A at the end. And so with that said, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Dan. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll see if this works. And let's go to slideshow. Is that working okay?
Perfect. We can see it just fine.
Okay, excellent. I'll start in. I'm hoping that there's enough time at the end for questions. I'm sure there will be. Some of your questions might be answered during the talk, but if you really see something that you need a clarification on, stop me. Of course, this will be posted, so you can look it over later too, if there's something that I kind of flew by quickly. I'm Dan Bean, and I'm director of the Palisade Insectary. I've been here since 2005. We got started in 1945 combating a pest of peaches called the peach moth or the oriental fruit moth. And at that point, they didn't have many options for control, so they turned to biocontrol. And there happened to be a parasitoid wasp that attacks the peach moth, and it was useful. It had been proven useful, but the place where it was really the most useful was right here in Palisade. It was used around the country. So the peach moth came under control through the efforts of the Palisade Insectary, and we got a lot of good PR from the growers of the region. We still have that program in place. We had a new facility built in 1992, and that's where we currently reside, and it's right a little bit north of so-called downtown Palisade. We've worked with about 90 different agents along the way, 90 plus, and we're still taking on new biocontrol agents for both weeds and insect pests. We're conservation services, and when I first arrived here, we didn't have a permanent presence on the Front Range, and now we have 2 biocontrol technicians on the Front Range, which really helps out because a lot of our problems are over on the Front Range and plains. Here's what our facility looks like. We've got 14,000 square feet. We have greenhouses. We have rooms for rearing agents. We have outside facilities for doing experiments, experimental gardens. You can see in the upper left, there's an aerial photo of the Palisade Insectary. I have a red arrow pointing at some cages that we set up in cooperation with CSU Fort Collins. And you can also see that we're surrounded by peach orchards, and that's very purposeful. We still serve the peach growers of the valley. We still serve them biocontrol, so we have close relations with them. We work with Colorado landowners and the general public to get all of our agents out. We have 2 programs that I'll discuss as Request a Bug and our subscription service program, which helps us connect with land managers, resource managers, and the public. We have, let's see, I think that's it for this slide. I'll start out by introducing biocontrol. What is biocontrol? It's an ecologically based pest management method using natural enemies. And natural enemies can include insects, mites, pathogens, to suppress pests, and pests can be insect pests or noxious weeds, and we work with both. I include ecologically based pest control because it's very important for our end users to realize that we're not spraying herbicides or insecticides. And therefore, what we do, the agents that we get out into the field are going to work at what I call the pace of ecology. In other words, the plant's not going to die immediately when it's attacked by an herbivore. The insect population, when attacked by biocontrol agents, doesn't suddenly disappear. It's always there. A good example would be our peach pest control program, where we use the wasps shown in this slide, Macrocentris, and release 1.5 million of them in the valley. The pest is still here. As I told you before, it started in 1945. We still have that pest in the valley. We didn't eradicate it, but it's maintained at low levels by the use of Macrocentris, parasitic wasp that kills it from the inside out. So there's always going to be some of the pest, and there'll always be a need for biocontrol. But it has never crossed an economic threshold. Maybe once back 40 years ago when they stopped releasing Macrocentris, it did, but that pest hasn't crossed the economic threshold since the initiation of the biocontrol program in 1945. So it's a success. One of the questions that come up is what's the process? How do we do it? How do we use? What are we battling, and how are we doing it? And in order to answer that question, it's important to consider what makes an introduced species invasive. All of the species that we work with, all of the species that we try to control are invasive, meaning they came from another continent, came from far away, and were introduced here and really took off. As an example, the peach moth, it came from East Asia, was introduced here, did really well in the US, and eventually invaded the valley. So it came from somewhere else. Some of the thoughts on why introduced species become invasive include an absence of natural enemies, unusual genetics, better competitors, drivers of ecosystem change, etc. But we like to focus on number one, and I think everybody agrees, like most ecologists agree, that number one is at least a component of it. When an introduced species is brought in and introduced either intentionally or accidentally, it comes in with an absence of its natural enemies or the controls that it had when it was in its native range. Our goal is to get some of these natural enemies back and reimpose this way of control, this ecological suppression. Now, the absence of natural enemies is called enemy release, and so our goal is to change that through classical biocontrol, where we reunite the invasive species with specialist natural enemies from the native range. And so enemy release is eliminated. In other words, we resupply some of the enemies, and the invasive species that we're trying to control are no longer released from those ecological constraints imposed by natural enemies. And that's the entire basis of classical biocontrol and what we practice. The one thing to consider with that, in the native range of these species, they usually have several dozen or maybe several hundred natural enemies that keep them under control. We try to select the ones that are safe, and they're tested before release to make sure that they're safe. And we end up using only specialists, that meaning that they only feed on one or a few species. And that's a major concern in biocontrol, safety and the use of specialists. Now, if you think about enemy release, we're never going to bring all the natural enemies over, We try to select the natural enemies that we feel are going to have the greatest impact on the pests that we're trying to control. I always like to throw this slide in because it shows tamarisk being defoliated by the tamarisk beetle Diarrhabda carenulata. And this was a photo taken along the Colorado River near Moab. And you can see that all the defoliated plants in the background are tamarisk. And in the foreground, there are native species, including desirable species such as willows, and they're completely untouched. And that's only possible because the tamarisk beetle is a specialist and will do anything to find tamarisk and will leave everything else alone. I always like to at least very briefly describe why this is possible, mostly because we as human beings are omnivores. That means we'll eat almost anything if we're hungry enough. And the hungrier we get, the less selective we are. In the world of insect-plant interactions, there are some generalists like grasshoppers. That's a very commonly used example, and we see it all the time. They'll feed on just about anything. If anybody is aware of I'm sure you're all aware that Japanese beetle is a big problem on the Front Range. It's becoming a problem here in Western Colorado. It's a generalist feeder and will feed on over 100 different species, probably a lot more. Those are not the agents that we use. Obviously, I wouldn't have a job now if they were. We concentrate on those that are really very tuned into their host plant. And most insect species, most herbivores are very tuned in. In other words, they spend all of their time and energy figuring out how to find and utilize a host plant. Down at the bottom, I show 3 ways that they interact, ways that can influence their interaction with the host plant. They have to be attracted to the plant, so they smell it, and every plant gives off a different set of volatiles, every species. So they're attracted to very specific signals. Once they arrive and feed on the plant, they're stimulated to continue feeding by signals, the taste of the plant, in other words. And then most of the plants, I won't even say most, like all of the weeds that we deal with are toxic in one way or another and are repulsive to most insect species as well as wildlife, etc. Yesterday, I was out monitoring Russian knapweed on the Dolores River, and we were with a monitoring crew, and we were all touching the plants. And then at lunchtime, everybody got their food and started eating it and noticed that it was extremely bitter. Russian knapweed tastes terrible. It has enough chemicals on the outside. It's toxic to horses. It's toxic to most insect species. But if you're co-evolved with that plant, and that's the plant you use, your body, your physiology is able to detoxify it. That's part of the game. So those really keep specialists concentrated on their specialty plant, those plant insect interactions. And we haven't had our main problems in biological control, problems that have arisen and those that are considered really bad, have all been from the use of non-specific organisms or generalist organisms for biocontrol. And if you go back to some of the disasters, and there have been a few, it's really use of very generalists to control a specific pest. And one that I always like to point out is the cane toad, which was released in Australia to control a beetle, which the grub lives underground and the adult lives up on the sugar cane, and the toad lives above ground, on the ground, and never actually contacted its intended target, but it eats everything else. It was introduced from South America in the 1930s and has spread across northern Australia, the semi-tropical region, and is a major disaster, but is not a specialist. It's not something we would ever consider for release in a biocontrol program. Weed biocontrol involves a lot of different steps. All of these are really focused on safety. So after you've gone through overseas research in the US, under heavy quarantine conditions, approval from multiple agencies, including the Technical Advisory Group for the Biocontrol of Weeds, USDA APHIS, Fish and Wildlife Service, some additional field testing. Finally, you get the 526 permit, which I'm showing in the upper right, which allows us to do open field releases. There are a lot of safety concerns that have been met through that whole process. So when the insects finally come to us, when the biocontrol agents arrive with their USDA APHIS approval, I am very comfortable with releasing them. Now, when I started in biocontrol, I was a little skeptical. I was always thinking, like, how do we know this or that? But after being in it for over 20 years and seeing the agents in action in the field and watching the processes, I'm very comfortable with releases, knowing full well that everything we do in life has some risks involved, but these risks are minor compared to the risks imposed by the invasive species that we're trying to control. The next topic that people always ask me about is, well, does it work? Is it worth releasing? Should I bother? Should I go ahead with spraying my herbicide and forget about biocontrol? And I'd say this is, of course, this is a question that each person who uses biocontrol, each agency, each weed manager has to determine for themselves. But I would say that under some circumstances, biocontrol is extremely effective. Usually if you have high densities of weeds over a wide area, biocontrol can actually bring relief to thousands or even tens of thousands of acres of infested lands. I have a couple of examples here. The upper panels show biocontrol of leafy spurge, and these panels show a spot near Pine, Colorado, where leafy spurge flea beetles were released, and a few years later, you could hardly find leafy spurge. It's still around. It's an ecological system, as I said, but it's pretty much gone. The lower panels show really the largest success story in weed biocontrol, which is St. John's wort, which covered over 100,000 acres in Northern California and Southern Oregon, probably well over 100,000. And after the release of a chrysolina beetles, not only took out St. John's wort, but there were enough native grasses that made a strong comeback that it saved many hundreds of thousands of acres of grazing land from invasion by St. John's wort, which had completely destroyed its value for livestock. So next we'll come to what do we do at the Palisade Insectary? That was a general overview of biocontrol, particularly weed biocontrol. We have three components that we've to our mission. One of them is implementation, one's monitoring, and one's education. And these are critical for our abilities to distribute and help develop safe, effective biocontrol agents. And I'll go through each one. That's a picture of a photo of the insectary in the handling room, and Nina Loudon showing off some of our biocontrol agents to members of River's Edge West, which is a nonprofit dedicated to restoration of riparian areas. Implementation involves all those steps that it takes to get to the point where we can really make biocontrol effective in the field. And it involves rearing of the agents, field collecting of the agents, distribution of the agents, and better understanding of the agents and how to make them work either in the field or rearing them at the insectary. And it's really a major undertaking. Oftentimes when we get the insects, they don't come with an instruction manual. They should, but they don't. We have to figure out how to use them and work with them. All we know is that they're safe. And that's really like I said before on some of those other slides, that's the main goal of the permitting system is provide us with safe agents. So we have to learn how to get them out in the field and make them work. Some of these panels show us working on a Russian knapweed agent. um, two of them actually, that cause the formation of galls on Russian knapweed, and has caused and have really been effective in beginning to bring Russian knapweed under control. But we didn't know how to use them. We didn't know what time of year to release them, how to raise them in the insectary, or how to get them out. And so that took about 3 years of efforts, both in the field and in the lab, to get these agents prepared for release. In the upper right, you see one of our seasonal staff members, Melanie Malik, who has a degree in biology from CMU, and she's arranging a whole cart of galls that will be shipped out to end users around the state. But we didn't know how to do this in the beginning. We had to figure out how to prep and ship these so that end users could put them out in their Russian knapweed patches. In the lower right, I included a photo of one of our collaborators, Rich Hansen, helping us collect Diarrhabda beetles. These are the beetles that feed on tamarisk. And we didn't really know where and how to effectively collect, store, and redistribute them. That was one of our first projects here after I arrived. So implementation is critical and takes some time. Once they're out in the field, we monitor them. That means tracking them, tracking establishment, tracking impact, and we use various monitoring techniques to do that. And it often involves long hours in the field. I told you I was out there yesterday tracking Russian knapweed agents, and we were using the macro plot monitoring protocol, and you can see that in the lower right, what that involves. But it's censusing within a 16-meter square plot right in the center of where the biocontrol agents are released, and then following out transects from there to determine how far the biocontrol agents have self-propagated since their release and what it is doing to the weed population. So we have monitoring programs in place for all of our projects, including the peach moth project, which started in 1945. We do peach moth trapping in the valley. We trap with pheromone traps, and we interact with farmers and let them know what's happening. It's part of adaptive management to know where your pest is. And then education, that's what we're doing right now. The production of written materials, presentations like I'm giving now, workshops, facilities, tours, all of this is critical because the public, the interested public, as well as end users of Request a Bug, people within the department like yourselves need to know what we do in order to more effectively get our agents out and have people understand how they're useful. We operate within an integrated pest management framework, and that includes some research on and educating the end users about other control measures and how they might better mesh with biological control. And all of these listed on the side: mowing, grazing, even herbicides, conservation, competition, restoration, all of these have been shown to be effective in used in conjunction with biocontrol. So it's not as if we're saying you've got to just use biocontrol and avoid all others. And in fact, you can get a better result when incorporating all of these other methods in a biocontrol program. We have two ways to reach the public. And the first one is Request a Bug, and it's really separate from all of our development programs and getting biocontrol agents out in our first round of releases. Request a Bug allows the public to contact us and request biocontrol agents. We ship them out, and we ship out about 2,000 releases annually to public end users, and also we also work with resources managers and weed managers. The second level of interaction is the biocontrol subscription program, in which a weed manager, let's say a county weed manager, would get in touch with us and say, I don't just want 5 releases, five boxes of bugs. I really want to know how to use them, I want to know what to tell the end users. I want to let you set up monitoring sites in our county. I want to contact landowners who'd be happy to do that. In other words, more engagement with the insectary. And so that's another level of our interaction with the public and with those interested in utilizing biocontrol. And you can look at descriptions of both of these on our website. At the end of the year, we have a distribution table that shows what we got out in the Request a Bug program. And as you can see, a lot of releases. If you throw the peach moth into it, you're talking about 3,000 or more releases annually that we provide to end users. I'm happy to say that we have really gotten a lot of support in the state of Colorado, mostly from end users, but also organizations like the Colorado Weed Management Association. Our end users include a lot of county weed managers and municipal weed managers, as well as agency folks. We have tours that include, we've given Governor Polis a tour. We have tours that include not only weed managers, but state legislators. So we are happy, and we are getting widespread support. And without that, we couldn't do what we do. But we're always cognizant of the fact that we need to keep it out there so that people know what we do, and so that, let's say, the legislature knows that when they have that line item for Palisade Insectary, that we're actually accomplishing goals that they're interested in and that the people of Colorado are benefiting from. Our facility out here has 4 technicians and an office manager, and the biocontrol technicians are responsible for individual programs and will gladly interact with anybody who wants to use the agents that they are responsible for. Everybody works together. The Palisade Insectary is open 365 days a year because we have living organisms here. We also have John Kaltenbach, a state-funded biocontrol tech on the Front Range. We fill in greatly. We have about 15 people here now, but we have a lot of seasonal help. We also have grant-funded personnel that help us out in specialty projects, and these folks really work on projects that are usually federally funded, and they help us get biocontrol working and on the ground to help in implementation, monitoring, and all of that for specialty projects. Tori Gladham's on the front range in the Broomfield office, and she really has helped a lot with the subscription program as well as collection and releases. Quentin and Kelly are over here. They work on the toadflax project. Peach moth, Kelly works on the yellow star thistle project, which is federally funded. The insectary also works with academics around the Western U.S., including having a lot of connections to CSU primarily. We also work with Utah State currently and with Oregon State University on projects involved in the implementation phase, that is better understanding the biocontrol agents. Now we have all the end users and we have a lot of field space, and the projects that we're involved in working with professors from various institutions really require more data acquisition, more release sites, more monitoring. So we form cooperative relationships with them and usually attempt to get outside funding, and we've been successful at that. It's a winning combination when we can work with people who are more interested in the theoretical side while we have the practical side, or we are working on the practical side. So a few of our projects and some of our funding sources, Institute of Food and Agriculture, USDA funding, for a couple of our projects. USDA APHIS PPQ, they help fund knapweed, yellow star thistle, hoary cress. We've got 2 grants with them, including coordinating a regional program, Western region wide with yellow star thistle. The Forest Service is very interested in using biocontrol, and they explained it to me like this: like, we're used to long term, we're used to like 20 years or more in the Forest Service when it comes to growing and harvesting trees. So biocontrol is a long-term solution. We're interested in it. We're willing to support it. And the Department of Defense, they have a lot of land with a lot of weed problems, and they've funded what we do in an effort to get out biocontrol and help them on DoD lands. One of our projects, our 2 agents better than one, through CSU, through Paul Odie with CSU. We're interested in our 2 biocontrol agents for Russian knapweed better than one. We have 2, and a little bit of background on that. Sometimes it's said, well, maybe the biocontrol agents compete with each other and they'll actually harm each other in the field. So we've set up a lot of monitoring spots around Colorado, have released both agents, and these agents cause deformations of the plant known as galls, and they live within the gall systems. The 2 agents are a wasp, a galling wasp that hits a stem, and a shoot tip fly that hits the growing shoot tips. I have a photo of the shoot tip gall and stem galls both together on the same plant. And we're asking the question, well, if you release them both at the same site, are they going to compete? Is one going to repel the other? Are we better off just using one rather than 2? And Paul Odie was interested in that question from a theoretical side. So we have 4 of these so-called macro plots set up where we're censusing the galls in the field and looking at the impact that they have on Russian knapweed. The project that I helped out with yesterday was to census galls within a 16-meter square spot, and also to do some transects and look at the return of native vegetation after biocontrol out on the Dolores River, an isolated spot that's heavily infested by Russian knapweed. And there's Sonia Daly, the project manager, in the background. And in the foreground, you see a plant that has all of these galls, all these stem galls on it, and it's kind of looks gnarled and deformed. This is not what a Russian knapweed plant typically looks like, but the plants there look that way. Now, within that 16-meter square, relatively small area, we've seen over 50,000 galls formed on the knapweed, and the knapweed is starting to go down. The only way that we can track it is to really get down into the Russian knapweed, count galls, and see what's going on at that level. We've also found that when one galling agent, the one that hits the stems, attacks, the one that hits the shoot tips actually comes in and benefits from that, because the stem galler causes the plant to deform, send out more shoot tips, and it gets a double whammy. So 2 agents are better than one. And here it is shown on a couple of graphs. The shoot tip gall midges increase as the stem gall wasps have increased from 2019 to 2022. So both agents are really active in the field, and they not only do they get along well in an ecological sense, but their numbers increase when they're together. The reason that stem galls have declined a bit is because the stems are now shorter and they're really deformed like this in a lot of cases. There's just not enough room for the stem galling wasps to actually lay their eggs anymore. So we call that a success story. Our successes so far have included field bindweed, leafy spurge, tamarisk, Russian knapweed, which is a current ongoing success story, Canada thistle, and Dalmatian toadflax. And we have before after pictures for all of these. I could spend a whole talk doing the before and after and monitoring with all of these targets, but that would be much more than a coffee hour. And then we have new programs in place, including for hoary cress. Those that are used to seeing a lot of this stuff coming out in spring would be happy to know that we have a mite that's going to hit this plant in the field. We're showing it to damage the plant in lab conditions. That is, we're early in the implementation phase for this one. And we have a yellow star thistle agent that hits the growing rosette of yellow star thistle, which occupies about 15 million acres in California. We have agents for hound's-tongue, coming down the line for hound's-tongue, oxeye daisy, Russian olive, which I think will be very really popular, especially on the western slope, and cheatgrass, which we thought was probably we wouldn't be able to find an agent for it, but we do have some coming along. We like to work with other agencies because our staff is relatively small, and those that are attempting to control invasive species do most of the on-the-ground surveying, most of the work, and we just want to provide them with the method to control and with some advice on how to use it and how to monitor. And along those lines, we have a long-term program with Dinosaur National Monument to control invasive species. That project started in 2006 with tamarisk biocontrol. Dinosaur National Monument it's a very difficult place to work as a weed controller because you can't go back and spray on the remote rivers, the Yampa and the Green. The Yampa and the Green rivers are pretty much wild rivers, difficult to access except by raft. So we started releasing tamarisk beetles in 2006. The tamarisk beetles took off and began defoliating plants. Dinosaur National Monument helped us monitor the spread of tamarisk beetles up and down both the Yampa and the Green, and at the confluence, and found that tamarisk is going down, but it's a long-term monitoring project. Christy Gladham, who is a biocontrol technician out here in Palisade, took it upon herself to float both rivers and help Dinosaur National Monument in their monitoring program. She's taking off today to do a monitoring trip down the Green River. Since that time, we have developed agents for Russian knapweed and Canada thistle, and we do have agents for musk thistle. And so Emily Spencer and her crew at Dinosaur have really been interested in working with us on those agents. So we have a multiple agent, multiple target IPM program for invasive species in remote areas in Dinosaur National Monument. And because of that, Commissioner Greenberg was alerted to that. She'd heard about that program and that project and decided that it would be, given the scenic nature of Dinosaur National Monument and the two rivers, the Yampa and Green, that come together in the middle of the park, she decided it'd be a good idea to use that to showcase biocontrol and also the interaction and cooperation of the CDA with other agencies, including the National Park System. So we took a trip down the Green River and had some people from the department came along. We had some people from the legislature, including Senator Bridges, and we did a little bit of IPM. We did some pulling of leafy spurge, but we also did some release of biocontrols for Russian knapweed. And we got to witness biocontrol in action for tamarisk as well as Russian knapweed. And we got to talk to Park Service people and better understand their concerns with invasive species control within a wildland. We also got to talk about water issues, since two major rivers have a confluence within the park. And all in all, it was a great way to talk about invasive species management, ecosystem management, and the use of biocontrol. The best way to learn about the insectary is to come and take a tour with us, and we're always open to that possibility, or you can check us out on the website. And if there are any questions, if we have time or people have questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Dan. We did have Mariah had a three-part question for you, so we'll just kind of work through the question here. Um, Mariah asked, as a district manager, I would like to coordinate a regional request to bug for landowners in my area, including proper ID and documentation of application. Where can I visit and pick up orders of each bioagent requested? Is this possible?
It is possible. I'm going to stop sharing this. It's possible. You'd have to work with us. Probably the best way would be to with coordinate with me, with Tori Gladham on the Front Range, and we'll figure out what you need, what biocontrol agents you need, what time of year would be best to get them, and how we can. It sounds like a logistics problem that we can work through, and we've done it before with the coordination of mass releases to multiple landowners. It's the kind of thing that we can definitely do. I would ask, like, where is your territory? What size of territory would we be dealing with? How many landowners would we be dealing with? And we can definitely make it happen. You can contact me. I can put you in touch with the right people to get it off the ground. We'd be happy to do it.
Perfect. And we'll be sure to share Dan's contact email too afterwards if you didn't get it on the last slide. And then next question from Mariah was, what's the status on the rust fungus for Canada thistle? It's everywhere over here. Emphasis on the everywhere.
That, we launched that program and it was great. And then the EPA and USDA APHIS got into I would say a regulatory tussle about who's going to regulate the rust fungus. And so right now we're no longer releasing it until they figure things out. And I could get deeply into the regulatory elements of it. I don't think anybody wants to hear that. I'll just say that the USDA APHIS regulates biocontrol and EPA regulates pesticides. And so if somebody decided to call it a biopesticide, which is really not a proper characterization of it, and I said so in the beginning. And so now EPA is looking at it as a biopesticide and how to regulate it in a way that falls under their jurisdiction. And probably once every 2 weeks, we have this discussion on some kind of a Zoom meeting about how that is progressing. As of this year, no permits for release, and they've suggested we hold off on it. I'm hoping that by the end of next year we have permits. I was very upset about it because it just isn't. It's not appropriate. Like, you have to figure out what you're regulating and where it falls, and it really wasn't appropriate to call it a biopesticide. It is a classical biocontrol agent, and it's safe. It was permitted, the whole 9 yards. It's actually it's present in the U.S. It's all over the place. You just have to get it started in your patch to help bring it down. But please stay in touch with us on that. We do have some experimental plots for release, and if there's an experimental plot that's appropriate, that's within your jurisdiction, we can work with you on that. We just can't mass release it. We have experimental plots out in Sterling, for instance. We've got some of the Parks and Wildlife food plots out in Sterling for wildlife. I have a lot of Canada thistle, and we've released the rust out there, and we monitor it, and that's okay. We have a specialized permit for doing that. So if you have some really specific situations where you want it, contact us, and you can work with us on that too.
Excellent. And then one last question from Mariah. Can we request an insectary staffer to present with a district for a program or weed talk?
Yes. And we do that. We have done it and we'll do it. If you, we're super busy now, but and you are too. In the winter, we give talks all over the place. And between tours and presentations, we probably do about 75 a year.
Mm.
And so we'd be very happy to be involved in that. Just contact me, give us a time frame, give us the weeds of interest or anything, and we can definitely get in touch with you and get somebody to give a talk.
That sounds like a great plug for a potential watershed association presenter or annual meeting
Yes.
or workshop. So that is excellent to know too. Other
And we do
questions?
that. We do that for sure. That's part of our educational educational component to our strategic plan. So we'd be happy to.
Perfect. Other questions for Dan while we have him here? A quiet group this morning. Okay.
If you want to email me with questions, that's good too. I can get back to you on that. And like I said, we do tours in the wintertime, so that's another good way to get a lot of questions asked and answered.
Perfect. Well, like normal, Dan said he would be okay with sharing these slides too. And so we'll be sure to do that afterwards. And it looks like, oh, we have one question from Ashley. Is there a list to join to get the most up-to-date information on potential biocontrol soon to be released?
We don't have that right now. I want to put it on the website. Let's see, your Arkansas Basin. Is that right, Ashley?
Lower Arc.
Lower. Yeah, you guys have a lot of weeds out there. And I would like to get something up on our website for potentials and when they'll be ready to go. The ones that I showed in this, yes, Russian olive, I think that one's coming right up. They've already released it in Canada. So that one's probably going to be the next that we get a permit for. Usually when they release in Canada, we follow right behind them with approval. And we have a mite for Russian olive. That mite's been tested. It has a number of features that make it very appealing for those that like Russian olive. It doesn't wipe out the plants. I don't like Russian olive, but I know out on the plains where you are, there are some people that like it as like shelter belts. It's the only thing that grows. It's not going to kill their Russian olives. It'll suppress it by diminishing seed production. So that one's coming up, and we'll let you know as soon as we'll try to post it somewhere as soon as we have it available.
So definitely keep an eye on their website, which you can find through CDA. Okay.
Yeah, we'll keep it posted on the website.
Perfect. Other questions? All right. Well, I will give a plug for our next coffee hour, which is scheduled. We've had a few back to back to back. And so we're going to be taking a little breather. And so our next coffee hour is actually going to be Wednesday, September 13th. And we're going to be joined by folks from Colorado Parks and Wildlife who will be sharing information about their habitat partnership program, and how conservation districts can be involved through that program with CPW. And so with that, thank you, Dan. We so appreciate you joining us today. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your day.